I never imagined I'd wake up to a world that had changed so drastically, especially not my own backyard. One moment, I was heading out on my boat for a quiet morning on the lake I had spent my life saving for, and the next, nothing. A car accident put me in a coma for nearly a year. When I finally opened my eyes in the hospital, the doctors called me lucky to be alive. But as I would soon find out, my real shock wasn't surviving the crash. It was what had happened while I was gone. The first day I came home, I was overwhelmed just to see my house again, to feel the fresh air on my face. But when I walked to the back porch and looked out over the water, my heart stopped. My peaceful private lake, the one I'd purchased specifically to have quiet, solitude, and complete ownership, was unrecognizable. There were tiki torches flickering along the shore. A massive white gazebo stood where my favorite willow tree used to be. Music pounded from speakers I didn't install, and people, strangers, were everywhere. Laughing, drinking, swimming. As if this place was their personal resort. I remember gripping the railing so tight my knuckles went white. Who were these people? And how did they even get access to my land? My next-door neighbor, a man named Rick who used to wave at me every morning, spotted me and jogged over, looking oddly nervous. "Hey, you're back," he said, almost sheepishly. "Listen, I can explain." Explain? What could possibly explain a full-blown beach being built on my property? He pointed to a sign near the entrance of what used to be my private dock. It read, "Community Beach, courtesy of the Lakeview HOA. HOA. I'd never signed up for any homeowners association. In fact, I'd chosen this property because it was outside any subdivision, completely independent. Rick swallowed hard and muttered something about decisions made while you were unavailable. That's when the pieces started to click together. As I stood there, watching teenagers splash in the water I once fished in, I felt something twist inside me. The sound of a jet ski roared past, nearly spraying me with water. My lake, my sanctuary, had been turned into a public playground without my consent. And as I would soon uncover, this wasn't just about parties and gazebos. There was paperwork filed in my name while I was in the hospital. Money had changed hands. Someone had profited off my absence. But the real question, the one that kept me awake that first night back, was who orchestrated all of this, and why they seemed so desperate to keep me from reclaiming what was mine. Because as I would soon find out, there were secrets buried under those perfect white sands. Secrets that could destroy more than just a summer paradise. And it all started the moment I decided to confront them. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of laughter drifting in through my open window. It wasn't birdsong or the gentle lap of water against the shore like I used to love. It was loud, jarring. I pulled back the curtain and saw at least 20 people spread out across what used to be my private shoreline. Kids were building sandcastles on freshly poured white sand, couples lounged in beach chairs that weren't mine, and a man in a bright yellow shirt with Lakeview HOA Security printed on the back patrolled near the dock as if he owned the place. I couldn't stay inside any longer. I grabbed my cane, I was still weak from months in the hospital, and stepped outside. Rick, my neighbor, was leaning against the fence between our properties, sipping coffee like nothing was wrong. "Rick," I called, my voice sharper than I intended. He froze, then slowly walked over. "You really should have called me," I said. "What the hell happened here?" Rick glanced nervously at the crowd behind me. "It's complicated. After your accident, no one knew if you were coming back. The HOA approached me, said they had the right to develop under community interest, since the lake wasn't being maintained. They invested." He winced at the last word. "Invested," I repeated, my stomach churning. "This is my land, my lake. How could anyone give them permission?" He lowered his voice. "They said you did. There's paperwork. Signatures. They filed it months ago." My heart slammed in my chest. "That's impossible. I was unconscious." Rick nodded. "I know. But they showed the county your signature notarized and everything. And once they started, well, people loved it. Property values skyrocketed. The whole neighborhood's been behind them ever since." I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. Someone had forged my name, stolen my property, and everyone around me had gone along with it because it made their homes worth more. Before I could say another word, a tall man in a navy polo approached from the beach. "Mr. Lawson, right?" he asked with a practiced smile. "I'm Greg Tanner, president of the Lakeview HOA. We heard you were back. Welcome home." I wanted to yell, demand answers, but his calm, almost smug tone left me speechless. He extended a hand as if we were meeting under friendly terms. "We'd love to discuss the arrangements we've made. There's a lot you'll want to know. Maybe later this afternoon." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I asked one question. "Who signed my name?" Greg's smile didn't falter, but something flickered in his eyes. "All in due time," he said smoothly before turning and walking away. I stood there, my pulse hammering, as the sound of music picked up again behind him. There was no doubt now. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a takeover. And I had no idea how deep it went, or how far they were willing to go to keep me from the truth. I couldn't shake Greg Tanner's expression from my mind. That flicker in his eyes when I asked about my forged signature. It was like a crack in a perfectly painted mask. I needed answers, and I couldn't rely on Rick or anyone else in this neighborhood to give them to me. They had all chosen silence in exchange for backyard beaches and rising home prices. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my old laptop, the one that hadn't been touched since before the accident. My hands trembled as I typed my name into the county records database. It didn't take long to find it. Lakeview Community Development Agreement, signed by owner Daniel Lawson. My name, bold on a PDF dated 6 months into my coma. There was even a video file attached, an official notarization recording. I clicked it, expecting to see a stranger impersonating me, but what I saw was worse. The video was blurry, grainy, almost like it had been recorded on purpose to hide details. A man sat at a table, face partially obscured by a baseball cap. The notary's voice read my name, and the man nodded, signing with a flourish. It wasn't me. Not even close. And yet, the county had accepted it as legal proof. I pushed back from the table, my heart racing. Whoever did this didn't just fake paperwork. They manipulated the system itself. That meant influence, money, or both. And Greg Tanner's smooth confidence suddenly made a lot more sense. The next morning, I decided to pay a visit to the gazebo, the one built where my willow tree once stood. As I approached, I noticed a woman sitting alone on one of the benches, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She looked out of place, unlike the others who laughed and mingled by the shore. When she saw me, she straightened. "You're Lawson, right?" she asked quietly. I nodded cautiously. She glanced around before leaning in. "Watch your back. This isn't just about the HOA. There's more money in this lake than you realize." Her voice was tight, urgent. "They're planning something big. I can't talk here." Before I could ask her what she meant, Greg's voice boomed from across the sand. "Enjoying the new view, Mr. Lawson?" The woman froze, then stood abruptly and walked away, disappearing into the crowd before I could stop her. That night, I found a plain white envelope tucked under my front door. Inside was a single photograph, an aerial shot of my property taken from above. The new beach, the gazebo, the expanded dock. But in the bottom corner, almost hidden in the trees, was something else. A fenced-off area I hadn't noticed before, with construction equipment parked around it. Scrawled across the back of the photo in messy handwriting were just 3 words. "Don't go there." I sat in the silence of my kitchen, staring at that picture, and for the first time since waking up, I felt something colder than anger, fear. Whoever was behind this wasn't just stealing my lake. They were hiding something far bigger, and I was already in deeper than I realized. I couldn't ignore the photo. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that fenced-off area in the trees, the words "don't go there" burning in my mind. By the third night, curiosity overpowered fear. I waited until the beach quieted down, the music faded, and the last of the tiki torches burned low. Grabbing a flashlight, I slipped out the back door and followed the narrow path along the lake's edge. The air was heavy with the smell of fresh-cut wood and gasoline. When I reached the tree-line, I saw the faint outline of the fence ahead, a chain-link barrier topped with "No trespassing" by property signs. My lake, my land, and now they were marking it as theirs. I killed my flashlight and crouched low, listening. There was movement beyond the fence, dull metallic clinks, low voices, and then the hum of machinery. I eased closer, my heart thudding. Through a gap in the brush, I saw the site clearly for the first time. It wasn't just a small construction project. Huge earth movers were parked beside a newly dug pit at least 30 feet wide. Pipes snaked out from the ground toward the lake. Two men in hard hats studied blueprints under the glow of a portable floodlight. One of them pointed toward the water, speaking in a voice I couldn't fully catch, but I heard one word clearly. "Deadline." Suddenly, a twig snapped behind me. I spun around, flashlight in hand, ready to defend myself, but it was the woman from the gazebo. She raised a finger to her lips. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered urgently. "You left me that photo, didn't you?" I hissed. She didn't answer directly. "They're diverting water," she said instead. "This whole project, it's not about a community beach. It's about what's under this lake. And if you don't stop them, you're going to lose a lot more than property." Before I could press her for answers, the floodlight from inside the fence swung toward the trees. Voices shouted. The woman's eyes widened. "Go," she whispered fiercely. She shoved me toward the path, then darted in the opposite direction. I stumbled through the underbrush as the sound of footsteps pounded behind me. I burst back onto my lawn, lungs burning, just as headlights swept across the yard. A black SUV idled at the end of my driveway. The tinted window lowered, and Greg Tanner's face appeared in the glow of the dashboard lights. "Out for a late-night stroll, Mr. Lawson?" His voice was calm, but his eyes were ice. "Be careful. Accidents happen around here." The SUV rolled away slowly, taillights fading into the dark. I stood frozen, shaking, knowing two things for certain. They were watching me, and they weren't afraid to threaten me openly. Whatever they were hiding beneath that lake was important enough to risk everything for. And I had just made myself their biggest problem. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Greg's voice, calm, threatening, echoing in my head. By morning, I knew I couldn't just sit and wait for whatever they were planning to happen. I needed proof, something undeniable that could expose what they were really doing to my lake. I started by calling the county office again, hoping to dig deeper into the so-called development permits. After being transferred 3 times, a clerk finally whispered something that made my stomach drop. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she said, "but the funding for your lake's revitalization isn't coming from the HOA. It's coming from a private corporation called Deepwell Resources." I'd never heard of them. A quick search brought up almost nothing, just a bare-bones website with vague claims about sustainable energy projects. No address, no contact information. And yet, they were pouring money into a hidden construction site on my property. Later that afternoon, I heard a knock on my door. Expecting Greg or one of his so-called security officers, I hesitated, but when I opened it, Rick stood there, pale and shaking. "We need to talk," he said quickly, glancing over his shoulder. "Inside. Now." He paced my kitchen, wringing his hands. I didn't know what they were doing at first. Swear. They told us it was just a beach project, something to make the neighborhood nicer. But I saw the trucks last week, the ones hauling out barrels at night. There's something in that lake, Dan. Something they're trying to extract. Extract? I repeated, trying to make sense of it. Rick nodded. Mineral deposits, maybe. Or worse. I heard one of the workers say something about contamination levels and a containment breach. That's why they wanted control of the lake. Not for fun. For whatever's underneath it. My head spun. This wasn't just a land grab, it was a cover-up. And if what Rick said was true, they weren't just stealing from me. They might be endangering everyone around this place. Before I could ask more, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A distorted voice came through, low and urgent. Stop digging, Lawson, or you won't make it to see what's at the bottom of that lake. Then the line went dead. Rick's face drained of color. They're listening to you, he whispered. At that moment, a loud boom echoed from the direction of the fenced-off site, rattling the windows. A plume of smoke rose above the trees. Sirens wailed in the distance, and I realized the stakes had just skyrocketed. Whatever they were doing under that water had gone horribly wrong. And now the whole truth was about to surface, whether they wanted it to or not. The ground shook as another blast tore through the night, sending birds scattering from the trees. Without thinking, I ran toward the smoke, ignoring Rick's shouts behind me. My legs burned, my ribs ached, but adrenaline pushed me forward. As I reached the edge of the fenced-off site, the scene looked like something out of a disaster movie. Workers scrambling, alarms blaring, water gushing from pipes like broken veins. I ducked behind a stack of crates, scanning the chaos. The massive pit I'd seen earlier was now a crater, its walls collapsing as water poured in. And at the bottom, glinting under the harsh floodlights, was something that didn't look natural. It was metal. A huge, curved structure buried beneath layers of mud and stone. Not pipes. Not mining equipment. This had been here long before the HOA ever touched this land. A voice barked orders nearby, and I turned to see Greg, his perfect composure gone. Seal it off. Well, nobody outside this site sees a thing. His men rushed to drag a heavy tarp over the crater, but water kept surging, swallowing their efforts. I grabbed my phone, snapping as many photos as I could, but before I could take more, a strong hand clamped on my shoulder. Greg spun me around, his face twisted with rage. You just couldn't leave it alone, could you? He hissed. Do you have any idea what you're messing with? It's my land, I shot back, my voice trembling but firm. And you've been lying from the start. What is that thing? For a moment, his expression cracked, revealing something like fear. It's not ours, he said quietly. It was here long before any of us. We were sent to keep it contained. Before I could respond, a deafening groan rose from the pit, like metal tearing under unimaginable pressure. The ground heaved again, and the curved structure began to shift, breaking through the mud like a beast waking from a long sleep. Workers screamed, scattering in all directions as water swallowed the site. Greg shoved me toward the trees. Run if you want to live, he barked before disappearing into the chaos. I didn't wait to argue. I sprinted through the woods, heart pounding, as the roar of collapsing earth and rushing water chased me. When I finally reached my porch, drenched and shaking, the night was eerily silent except for distant sirens. The beach was empty, the tiki torches extinguished, as if nothing had happened. But out on the lake, ripples spread from a single point, dead center, where the water seemed darker, deeper than before. I opened my phone, ready to call the authorities, but before I could dial, a new notification appeared on my screen. A single message, no number attached. You've seen too much. Leave the lake, or join us. And then, almost as if in answer, a low hum rolled across the water, vibrating through the ground beneath my feet. Whatever was under that lake. It wasn't finished. And neither was this fight. I stood on my porch long after the message disappeared from my phone, staring out at the black, restless water. The hum faded, leaving only silence, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something beneath that lake was alive, or at least active, and someone somewhere had been watching me the entire time. The next morning, I drove straight to the county office with every photo, video, and document I had collected. This time I didn't ask politely. I demanded to see the county commissioner and laid everything out. The forged signature, the secret funding from Deepwell Resources, the construction site, and the explosions that rocked the night. First they brushed me off. But when I showed them the footage of the buried structure rising from the pit, their expressions changed. Within hours, the State Environmental Agency and federal investigators were on my property. By evening, the entire lakefront was locked down. Fences went up, but this time they were to keep the HOA and Deepwell out, not me. The investigation uncovered everything Rick had suspected and more. Illegal drilling, falsified permits, and dangerous materials leaking into the water supply. Greg Tanner and several members of the HOA board were arrested. As for Deepwell Resources, the name vanished almost overnight. Their website wiped clean, their offices empty. It was as if they had never existed. Rick came by a week later. His usual confidence replaced with guilt. "I'm sorry, Dan," he said quietly. "I should have stood up sooner. We all should have. I didn't have the energy to stay angry anymore. We were all lied to," I told him. "But now we know." The woman from the gazebo never returned, and I never learned her name. Some nights, I wonder if she was part of Deepwell or someone trying to stop them from the inside. Either way, she saved my life. The lake itself has changed forever. The investigators sealed off the area where the structure had been, declaring it too unstable to disturb further. They called it a subterranean anomaly, but I don't buy that. I've lived here too long to ignore what I felt that night. The hum, the shifting water. Whatever was down there is still there, just waiting. I've decided to keep the property, despite everything. Some neighbors moved away after the arrests, unwilling to live next to a place shrouded in mystery. But for me, this lake is more than just land. It's a reminder of how quickly something you love can be taken, and how important it is to fight for it. Sometimes when the wind is still and the moonlight hits the water just right, I catch a faint vibration underfoot, like the earth itself is breathing. I don't know if the danger is truly gone, but I do know this. No one will ever take my lake from me again. And if whatever lies beneath ever stirs again, I'll be ready.